Hi, thank you so much. That was beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I like that. Yeah, yeah. Uh, to put a word on it is not very hard, but like the feeling that I feel right now is very, I want to say optimistic, but the door is open. So I, yeah, I'm just making all the connections that I want to make recently. And this is like great timing because I get to like hearing even what you just introduced me as is like the imposter syndrome is gone. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a lot of like the dream is coming true and the impact is being made in a measurable way instead of just a dream that I had for the last 5 years, and then like the small steps are like adding up into a reality. So I'm really optimistic, but I'm also feeling accomplished. It's like a really funny mix of feelings that I feel today. So, oh my gosh, yeah. It can be so hard. Yeah, super empowering. I know. Yeah, that's a great question. So, the frequent definition, right, is where somebody rolls up in a van, blacked out windows, and they take your child or your loved one or your neighbor and force them physically with violence into a situation that is either labor trafficking or sex trafficking or whatever sort of labor they're getting out of that individual. But the most chilling part about this is a lot of times there is no van and it's not a stranger. It's somebody that you may know. And it's a situation where it could be a romantic relationship that is on the outside, what you see and what's happening behind closed doors, or even right in front of your face, you don't recognize because they look normal, quote unquote, right? Everything looks fine. And I think most chilling part about human trafficking and why people will oftentimes shut down the conversation, because once people like myself start coming forward and sharing the testimony of what we have endured, it will make you sick. It will make you physically ill. And that's something that's really hard to chew for people, but it's not happening in a way where it's not visible. You just have to understand what you're seeing. And I think being able to identify those components of a scenario, it's just desperately needed, on many different aspects. Yeah. Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yes. I know. Yeah. I'm just 1 in 100. That's the statistic of people who live. I think that alone, because 100 people isn't very many people, but to me it's a lot. Imagine 99 people and then me who survived, and the amount of people that I encountered who were like myself, who went through the early grooming, it escalates. It's kind of what you were just talking about is the first step, and then the end result of abduction and things of that nature, where it's actually the violence comes later. So it's basically, it's a lifestyle pattern that you don't inflict on yourself on purpose. You just kind of end up there, and especially in the neighborhood atmosphere, there's always that one person, that you can say that all the rumors about them and what those rumors say. But then when that person on the inside is feeling like their deep trauma that causes them to live their life in that style, if that makes enough sense without me giving too many specific examples, you can only slut shame so much before you realize that it's a trauma response to behave in a certain way, and that's like one of the hardest parts I think about the human trafficking conversation is when I'm talking to certain organizations or NGOs or places that come into contact with victims, a lot of times, even with missing children, or I hope you catch my huge sarcasm, child prostitution, like just because all of these factors are around this balloon situation of a person being missing or whatever it is, right? You can't just use all those negative lights around a person and ignore how they're being exploited. The grooming cycle starts way too young, even through social media, music. The grooming starts way before we even realize, and we don't even realize by the content that we create what message we're putting forward when we send it out, whether it be we're laughing about it or we're crying about it or whatnot. There's young people that are consuming this now at a faster rate than we ever had the opportunity to. That's why the whistleblowers are blowing whistles big time right now, because, and they're loud right now, is detrimental to have the conversations, because you don't know who's in the house next door. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 100%. Yeah. The significance of age 11 to me that I just figured out recently, that it wasn't my fault. That was the first time that I was ever sex trafficked. And it was by my brother. It was a situation where it was the social media boom, and I had went to visit my brother, who was 20 years old at the time, and he is a bit mentally delayed, and he decided he was going to make a profile of me on MySpace and start chatting to people that he wanted to be friends with. And was like, yeah, playing both sides, going on his page, going on my page, like this is my cousin from Wisconsin, like she's 16, she's in the area, like she wants to hang out, and he put provocative material on the page. Like I never touched the page, he built the page, he set up the dates. That was all him. Like it had nothing to do with me. At no point was I ever in control of that computer. And like 3 or 4 days into the trip to go and visit, my grandmother came downstairs and found one of his friends on the couch with me in the home after a night out with him. And so what she said to me as an 11-year-old child, and now when I'm public speaking, I put my picture up there of what I looked like when I was 11, because there was no way that was my fault. There was no way, I was such a little girl, and she called me a hussy. She said, when my dad finds out and they're on their way, and when he gets there, like, I am going to be in so much trouble. And I was like, the whole ride home was me in trouble, and they didn't even ask details. They didn't even ask him how it ended up that way. At that point, I didn't feel safe to even say what had all actually happened. Yes. And Jason is not right in the head. We don't blame people who can't think clearly, right? And so I remember, like, that was always the thing about him, is no matter what he did, and I didn't even know, I didn't even remember, but I was informed as I grew up more, like, there was sexual abuse from him to me and somebody else in my family as well that he commit that was never dealt with, and so the grooming from him started probably when I was 3 years old, but I loved him. Like, I loved him and I loved my other brother, and I just wanted to feel accepted. So I just did what he told me to do because know any better at that time. I knew that it was sneaky, but I didn't know what was going to end up of it. I didn't know what the consequence was going to be. And I think that speaks volumes for what a lot of children with access to gaming systems and social media go through right now. They think that it's all fun and games until it's not a funny game anymore. And I'm in pain inside and probably externally as well. I had been traded. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. No. They they grounded me. Yeah. They grounded me. Yeah. It was my parents, unfortunately. And like, that was the climax of a very slippery slope with my parental unit, in myself, our relationship. It was completely divided. It was already divided. Even now, I feel like I always am playing the mediator and keeping things calm, but um when I was young, I knew how to agitate and I wanted out. You know what I mean? So I just really leaned into that picture that was painted of me and let it be who I was for a long time. And in every way, shape, and form of it, the way that you look at it, the world never allowed me to even be something else. They just took from me, and the best way that I could defend myself, because it was painful, like as I grew into my teen years and I was that girl in the community that developed early. And, even right there in fifth grade, as soon as my breast came in, I was a whore, and so when people started taking from my soul and the abuse started happening outside of the home, it was easier for me to give in than it was to fight because I feared I might die, and there were situations where I should have went to the police because the person was just a little bit younger than my parents on multiple occasions, and I felt like I couldn't because there were other girls in the community who came forward who were then slut shamed. And like in one case, there was a girl who had relationships with her best friend's father, and it came to the light, and everybody blamed the girl, even though she was a child, So I didn't want to be that girl. And so I allowed a lot of things to happen that I shouldn't have. Yeah. Yeah, I there's a little bit of regret in there. It's that part of shame, right? Where you can't really turn it off. You just have to deal with it head on and know that it's okay that you didn't stick up for yourself, but you can stick up for yourself now. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I couldn't really trust anybody. And even, like I had so many run-ins with police and they all treated me the same way. I like I probably had so much information that they wanted to have to keep the community safe, but instead they sent me to juvie and they talked about how I need to be nicer to my mom, like it was really crazy because they could have identified a victim in me so many times and they had the opportunity to do that through many institutions to be able to take predators off the street literally, and they missed that opportunity. I'm still fighting the stigma myself every day. You just caught me in my own tracks. And it also is part of healing for me to peel back the layers. And I'm like, wow, I understand myself now. That's been the greatest part about it, has been where you're really able to identify beyond that outer box, the box on the outside that looks like a wild horse. It looks like a wild horse, but the horse is a abused horse, and it's been maimed. And what we go through, and truly I don't mean to say men or women, but what we go through as women and the sexual expectations of us that arrive at birth are exhausting. Yeah. No. Yeah. 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 So, it was really crazy because the like shelter in place happened for a little while. And then the flight came. And I'll say I landed from flight and I'm just chilling now, but it didn't stop. I spent a long time trying to get away from that town. The funny part about what you just said is we have a mutual friend named Amber Sweener, right? And so it's crazy because I had just expressed to her recently when I walked into the circle that she has built. It was the first time I ever felt supported by women, the first time in my life. So there were a few people throughout my childhood that tried to help me, but I feel like when I started opening my mouth, it made them lose respect for people that they were friends with, maybe my parents, and it was too much for them to deal with. And that was without them even knowing. Yeah, that was just like with a tiny crumb, it was like, well, I just don't understand. And I think that was the really hard part for me was that I lacked like a strong female leader in my life. And the one person who was close to that, my grandmother, in a very she was an interesting lady, like she was really a tough, tough, tough person. She passed away and it was pretty much like wheels off at that point. Like I had nowhere else to turn in a woman's way, and I feel like my grandma was like our protector, even though, man, my grandma hated me some days, like I gave her a lot of problems, but she loved us and she advocated hard for us to my parents. And I'll never forget about that because it was just very impactful. When my grandma passed away, like my running away turned into like my mom was just so sick with sadness that she didn't call the police anymore. It was kind of when the leash came off. One of the funny things about human trafficking, there's always that lure, right? And the like the places and the things and the people, like the steps how you end up into the kidnap scenario. And I fell right into one of those traps. One girl that I graduated from high school with was dancing at a club in Wausau, and she kept telling me how much money she was making. She was getting by on her own, and she was 18 at the time. I look at 18-year-olds now and I'm really sad, because I'm like, oh no, I was still a baby, like I had so much time to make those adult decisions and fell right into the trap, So I went, and within a year, I found myself in captivity of a human trafficking ring in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Not only Green Bay, but they traveled through Appleton and Madison with me, and it was Madison, Wisconsin, where I ran from a motel after a few months of being sex trafficked. So it was really intense. Like going from childhood, shifting gears into my teen years and really going into that age of 18 there where you're an adult now. I don't know, man, that was a roller coaster, like it was one where you get off and you puke kind of roller coaster, and when I went into treatment afterwards, it was crazy because, the opportunity was there many times for people to identify me as a sex trafficking victim because I had been in the hospital. I had come face to face with police. There were opportunities to save me that were missed because of the inability to identify and have compassion. That whole like scenario, I ended up on crystal meth, and that was a symptom they treated while I was in treatment. So, you know, it wasn't like the real problem because I had a me problem. I had a big me problem, and it was huge. It was huge me problem. And instead of really digging in there, it was just like, let's get rid of the drugs. But that was helpful because without the drugs, I was able to see clearly what I wanted for the rest of my life. Just moving on, from that was really hard because there is the shame attached. And even just confiding in a partner of the question comes up, how many people have you had sex with? Simple question, right? No, it's not a really simple question because how do I tell somebody that I've been sexually assaulted over 200 times? How do I tell somebody that? And I feel like I'm supposed to lie. Yeah. 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 No. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Nope. Completely detached to it. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely would hate if I was still on meth. That would really suck. Yeah, that would really suck. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yes. It's the only thing that's kept me alive. Like the only thing, it's the only thing that's kept me alive. And even my shame, I can show up now and speak on these things with a smile on my face and giggle and laugh about it. But 3 or 4 years ago, it might have reduced me to tears or suicidal thoughts. And like having to forgive myself, not having to forgive myself, choosing to forgive myself has been the most empowering thing that I've ever done because, like you said, when I was talking about how do you have the sex talk even with a partner now, they do use it against you, even if you've been a victim. They don't even care of the fact that you were wronged. You've been touched that many times and they see you as a dirty person. And it's not everybody, but they use those things about you to control and manipulate your mind. So when you forgive yourself, you don't give other people power to utilize that information against you anymore because you don't care. Like that term, let it go. And I was always thinking to myself, but my intrusive thoughts won't let me, like my inside PTSD says, hey, guess what? Whore, or whatever, just like out of the blue, like, yeah. Yeah, it's like, or I'm driving down the road and like I'm not even on Highway 29. I don't know where I am, and but I'm next to you and I'm driving, like yeah, those are the type of things that are like the lifelong effects that the more I forgive myself, the less violent they are or the less loud. And I think that's the most important part is that if I didn't choose to forgive myself, if I allowed my shame to overwhelm me to a point where I couldn't leave my house or I did die by suicide or something like that, then I lose, then the battle's over and I've never been a quitter. And I've been fighting all my life, so if I don't get rid of these few negative things that were stopping me from drawing clear boundaries for myself, repeatedly over and over and over again, it was going to continue. And I just love life too much to let it consume me. Yeah, pretty much like in my head, I have put in this system where nobody gets close enough to hurt me. And like, even with significant other, you have to have clear boundaries, period. Like anybody who makes you think you're not supposed to have some sort of a boundary with them is like out of their mind. You know what I mean? So that's one thing. And even like on a professional level, I don't allow people the power to let it haunt me. So that was kind of like the birth of my business. Things that I love, I don't really do anymore just because they're too triggering. So I've built a business around something that I love to do, and that's helping people have hope that they can be good too. That is a really good question. You know what I would say to my 11-year-old self? Fuck pleasing these people because they're not going to be here later anyway. You need to do what makes you happy. That was part of my problem, was trying to please everybody and make sure everybody was happy around me and happy with me, and that I was satisfying everybody else's vision of me. I'm really, really proud of myself because even though I went through horrible things to become as self sufficient as I am, other people never learn that lesson and they remain dependent on their parents or their grandparents or some sort of safety net. You know, they never have the opportunity to really learn how to do it for themselves. And that's one thing that even if I figured it out a really hard way, nobody can ever take my home from me. Nobody ever has the power over me to decide my fate anymore. Yeah. 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 You can find me on LinkedIn. I also have my website, which is www.tayloryourown.com. Taylor Owens on LinkedIn. And my next steps, I'm really focused on policy. I think that some redefining of the way that we report and intervene with victims, it needs a lot of work. And so that is something that I'm really hyper focused on, is government policy and police training, NGO training, you know, even with the refugee resettlement and all of that. I'm just very involved with anything that has something to do with the movement of people, transfer of people, and where people can fall through the cracks. Yeah, I know. Yeah. 100%. I got lots of resources for that. So, yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me.